In 2015, Mark Douglas gave his final interview. What he said in those last moments should terrify every trader who thinks they understand the market. He looked directly at the camera and said something that contradicted everything most traders believe about success. Something that most trading educators would never dare to say. This was the man who wrote Trading in the Zone, the man who trained thousands of professional traders at the Chicago Board of Trade, the man who understood the psychology of markets better than anyone alive. And in his final years, he revealed the one lesson that 90% of traders will never accept, the one truth that separates those who make it from those who blow up their accounts over and over again. This is Mark Douglas's final warning to every trader who will listen. Mark Douglas wasn't born a trading psychologist. He was born a trader. And like most traders who enter the markets with confidence and capital, he lost everything he had. In the late 1970s, Douglas walked into the Chicago trading pits believing he had what it took. He had studied the charts. He understood the fundamentals. He was smart, educated, and determined. Within months, he had lost his entire stake. But unlike most traders who blame the market, blame the brokers, blame manipulation, Douglas asked a different question. He asked, "What is wrong with me?" That single question would consume the next 30 years of his life, and the answer he eventually found would change trading psychology forever. Douglas discovered something that most traders refuse to believe, even when it's staring them in the face. The market isn't the problem. Your mind is the problem. Your psychology is what's destroying you. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because what Douglas found wasn't just about controlling your emotions or having more discipline. It went much deeper than that. He discovered that the very traits that make you successful in every other area of life are the exact traits that will destroy you in trading. The harder you try to succeed, the faster you fail. Your intelligence, your work ethic, your determination to win, your refusal to give up. In the market, these become weapons that you turn against yourself without even realizing it. Douglas called this the fundamental truth of trading, and it's something that most traders never truly accept. The market is completely neutral. It doesn't know you exist. It doesn't care about your positions, your hopes, or your financial goals. Every tick on the chart, every candlestick, every price movement. It's just information, raw data. It has absolutely no meaning until your mind assigns meaning to it. And this is where 90% of traders make their fatal mistake. They believe the market is doing something to them. They take it personally. They make it about them. Listen to how traders talk. The market took my money. The market stopped me out. The market is manipulated against retail traders. The market did this to me. Listen carefully to that language. Douglas would say, the market didn't take anything from you. You gave it away. You made the decision to enter. You made the decision to hold. You made the decision to exit. There's a profound difference between being a victim and being responsible. Now, if you're feeling defensive right now, if something inside you is pushing back against what I'm saying, that reaction is exactly what Douglas warned about. That defensiveness is the problem. He called it the ego's need to be right, and he said it's the single most expensive addiction in trading, more expensive than any bad strategy, more destructive than any market crash. Think about it carefully. In every other area of life, being right is rewarded. In school, you get good grades for right answers. In your career, you get promoted for right decisions. In relationships, being right wins arguments. We're trained from childhood that being right equals being valuable. Being wrong equals being worthless. This belief gets programmed into us so deeply that we don't even know it's there. Then you enter the market, and suddenly, being right on any single trade is completely meaningless. You can be right and still lose money. You can be wrong and still make money. Everything you've been taught about success no longer applies. Douglas explained it this way. Professional traders don't care about being right on any individual trade. They only care about making money over a series of trades. These sound like the same thing. They're completely different. Understanding the difference between needing to be right and wanting to make money is worth more than any trading strategy you'll ever learn, more than any indicator, more than any course. Let me show you exactly what Douglas meant by this, because this is where most trading education completely fails you. This is the gap that nobody talks about. A trader who needs to be right will hold a losing position far too long, hoping and praying it comes back. because closing that position means admitting they were wrong, and their ego cannot tolerate being wrong. A trader who needs to be right will cut their winners way too early, because taking profit proves they were right about something, even if the trade had much more to give. They sacrifice profits to feed their ego. A trader who needs to be right will revenge trade immediately after a loss, because they need to prove that the market didn't beat them. They need to get their money back right now. They need to restore their sense of being right. Douglas would watch traders do this for years, for decades, their entire careers spent in this cycle, making the same mistakes over and over, never seeing the pattern, never understanding why. And here's the cruel irony that Douglas pointed out. The smarter you are, the worse this problem gets. Because smart people are used to being right. They've built their entire identity around being the smartest person in the room. So what's the solution? How do you escape this trap? This is where Douglas's teaching becomes genuinely radical. This is where he lost a lot of people. He said you must learn to think in probabilities, not possibilities, not predictions, not opinions about what the market should do. Pure probabilities, like a casino. This sounds simple when you hear it. It's not simple at all, because probability thinking requires you to accept something that your ego absolutely hates, something it will fight against with everything it has. You must genuinely accept that you don't know what's going to happen next. Not on this trade, not on any trade, not ever. You must embrace uncertainty as a permanent condition of trading. Douglas called this the uncertainty principle of trading. Every edge, no matter how good, only works over a series of trades. It never works on any single trade. You cannot know which trades will win and which will lose. Think about how a casino operates. The house doesn't know if the next spin of the roulette wheel will be red or black. They have no idea. And here's the key. They don't care. They know that over thousands of spins, the math is in their favor. The edge will play out. That's all they need to know. They don't stress about any individual spin. They think in terms of the long game. Professional traders think exactly the same way. Each trade is just one spin of the wheel. The outcome of any single trade is essentially random. What matters is the aggregate result over many trades. But most traders can't accept this. They need each trade to mean something. They need each trade to validate them as a person. They need to be right on this trade, right now, today. And this brings us to Douglas's most controversial teaching, the one that made him enemies in the trading education industry, the one that most gurus will never tell you. He said that most trading education is not just useless, it's actively harmful. It makes traders worse, not better. It sends them in exactly the wrong direction, because it focuses on the wrong thing entirely. It teaches you how to analyze the market better, how to find better entries, how to read charts more accurately. But it never teaches you how to analyze yourself. Douglas argued that a mediocre strategy executed with perfect psychology will beat a perfect strategy executed with mediocre psychology. Every single time, without exception. Psychology trumps strategy. Yet traders spend years, sometimes decades, searching for the perfect indicator, the perfect entry signal, the perfect system that will finally make them profitable, the holy grail of trading. They never find it, because it doesn't exist. And even if it did exist, their psychology would destroy it. They would find a way to sabotage themselves. They always do. So how do you actually develop the psychology that Douglas described? How do you make this real instead of just theoretical? This is where his final teachings become genuinely practical. Douglas outlined 5 fundamental truths that every trader must accept. Not just intellectually understand, not just agree with in theory. You must accept these truths emotionally, in your bones, in your nervous system. Truth number 1. Anything can happen in the market, literally anything, at any moment. No matter how confident you are, no matter how perfect your setup looks, the market can do the exact opposite of what you expect. Truth number 2. You don't need to know what's going to happen next in order to make money. This is counterintuitive. But consistent profitability comes from managing probabilities, not from prediction. Truth number 3. There is a random distribution between wins and losses for any given set of variables that define an edge. You cannot know the sequence. You can only know the probability. Truth number 4. An edge is nothing more than a higher probability of one thing happening over another. That's it. It's not certainty. It's not a guarantee. It's just a slight statistical advantage. Truth number 5. Every moment in the market is unique. No pattern ever repeats exactly the same way twice. The past does not determine the future. Each trade exists in its own universe. Now, you might read these 5 truths and think you understand them. Douglas would say, you don't. Not yet. Not really. Because there's a massive gap between intellectual understanding and emotional belief. Understanding something intellectually and believing it emotionally are completely different things. You can know something in your head while your body, your nervous system, your gut believes something entirely different. You can know intellectually that any trade can lose, but when you're actually in a trade with real money on the line, do you feel that uncertainty? Or do you feel certain that this one will work? That feeling of certainty is the ego talking. And Douglas said it will cost you everything if you let it run your trading. Certainty is the enemy of the profitable trader. Douglas spent his final years trying to help traders bridge this gap. The gap between knowing the right things and actually believing them. Between understanding and embodiment. He developed specific exercises, mental rehearsals, practical techniques to reprogram the deep beliefs that sabotage traders. Ways to rewire your psychology from the ground up. One of his most powerful exercises was something he called the 20 trade commitment. It's simple to understand but transformative if you actually do it. Here's how it works. You commit in advance to taking the next 20 trades that your system generates. No exceptions. No skipping signals because you have a bad feeling. No adding to signals because you feel extra confident. You don't judge any individual trade by its outcome. You only judge yourself on one thing: execution. Did you follow your rules? Did you take the signal? Did you manage the trade according to your plan? After 20 trades, you assess. But you don't assess whether you made money. You assess whether you followed your system. Perfect execution is the only goal. The money takes care of itself. This exercise does something profound to your psychology. It separates your self-worth from the outcome of any individual trade. It breaks the connection between being right and being valuable. Over time, you start to see losses differently. They become information, not failure. Wins become information too, not validation. The emotional charge drains out of individual trades. But here's what Douglas said in his final interview, the part that haunts me, the part I think about every time I sit down to trade. He said that most traders will hear everything he taught. They'll read his books. They'll watch his seminars. They'll agree with every word. They'll even teach his concepts to other traders. And they still won't change. They'll keep making the same mistakes. They'll keep blowing up accounts. Because real change requires something that most people aren't willing to give. It requires you to admit that you've been wrong. Not wrong about a trade. Wrong about who you are as a trader. Wrong about your entire approach. Wrong about your identity. It requires you to rebuild your identity from scratch. To become someone who genuinely doesn't need to be right. Someone who can lose without feeling like a loser. That's a complete psychological transformation. Douglas knew he was asking a lot. He knew that most people who heard his message wouldn't actually do the work. He taught anyway, for decades, because some people would listen. Because for the few who actually listen, who actually do the work, who actually change their psychology at a fundamental level, trading becomes something completely different. It stops being a battle against the market. It stops being stressful and emotional and draining. It becomes a practice of self-mastery, a meditation, a discipline. The charts become a mirror. Every trade reveals something about who you are, what you believe, what you fear, what you're attached to. Trading becomes a path to self-knowledge. Mark Douglas passed away in September of 2015. He was 67 years old. He spent the last 30 years of his life trying to share what he learned in the trading pits of Chicago. He left behind 2 books that changed the industry, thousands of hours of seminars, and a warning that most traders will hear, agree with, and completely ignore. The market doesn't care about your analysis. It doesn't care about your indicators, your predictions, your need to be right, your ego, your hopes, your fears. It's completely indifferent to all of it. The only thing that matters is whether you can execute your edge consistently, without self-sabotage, without letting your psychology destroy what your strategy could build. And that requires a psychological transformation that 90% of traders will never make. Not because they can't, because they won't, because they're not willing to pay the price. So the question isn't whether you understood this video. The question is whether you'll actually change, whether you'll do the work, whether you'll be in the 10%. If this resonated with you, if something in here hit different, subscribe to this channel. Because we're building something different here. Something that goes deeper than surface-level trading content. Not more indicators, not more strategies, not more noise. A deeper understanding of what actually moves markets, and more importantly, what actually moves you. Because in the end, trading isn't about the market. It's about you. It always has been. Mark Douglas dedicated his entire life to this message. The least we can do is actually listen. I'll see you in the next one.